Welcome to the second edition of the Demon Huddle 2024, presented by Cross Financial Group. I'm your host, Jason Pugh, joined as always by head coach Blaine McCorkle. And Coach, we're going to get in and just kind of rip the Band-Aid off. Thursday night in South Alabama was a tough one, and I think that may be understating it just a bit, but short turnaround, FBS team, 5-day week, you hear about perfect storm, and it kind of felt that way.
It was, and there's no excuses. We went out there and we got our tails handed to us. There's no question about that. But it was a little bit of a perfect storm. And as I kind of said after the game, if there's people that really pay attention to our program who didn't think a night like that was possible, you're kind of blind to where our program is. All things considered, we don't want to continue to go back to where we are, but we did have a short week. 5 days prior, we played a very physical 15-round fist fight that went down to the last play of the game, actually an extra play, and our kids spent themselves physically, emotionally, just completely 5 days prior. And then we're not mature enough as a program yet to put those things to bed and move on. And I think I've coached in probably 18, maybe close to 20 FCS, FBS matchups, and I've never been in one where the kids kind of showed up flat. You can't do that, or that's going to be the result you get. But in a sense, that's what happened because of the week prior. There was a little bit of uncertainty through the week about would the game be played, would the game be moved because of Hurricane Francine coming in. We had to change our travel route. There's just a lot going on there. And then you show up and play an FBS team like that who is 0-2 and needs to prove something. It really was a bit of the perfect storm. But at the same time, it does show how far we have to go. We're still a work in progress. Somebody after the game, I got a lot of encouragement after the game, which I appreciated, but somebody actually sent me a picture from practice at the end of last year where only 15 players showed up to practice. So we've gone from only having 15 players show up in the fall to competing against the FBS program that just won a bowl game a year ago. So that's a big hill to climb, but we know that. I've said a million times, I know what I signed up for. We know what we got into. So even though the night was tough, I'm not at all discouraged because I see where we're going. And that was one of the challenges to the kids after the game is, they're 18 to 22 years old. Sometimes they can't see past their face mask, but you have to see to, a week down the road, a month down the road, a year down the road, which nobody wants to hear that, especially our seniors, but that's the reality that we are, trying to build something, and those things are going to happen, and we're going to learn from them. We're going to rebound and get ready for Weber State.
Well, I think you hit on it too. Being in the locker room with you guys afterward, hearing your speeches, both the first week on the road, last week on the road. Not going to get too much into that because that stays in the locker room. But one thing that you did that goes without saying for everyone that has the benefit of a little bit of wisdom like you and I do is it's a little different when you're 44 and 45 and knowing what you've seen and trying to entail that to 18 to 22-year-olds and make them understand that. But I think that's what you said is with the benefit of time, you do understand that, hey, the world's not ending.
That's
you
right.
do have to push on and go forward.
That's right. It is about the big picture. It is about building a program. And one thing that I'm going to share with the team this week, a few years ago, a lot of people know my wife was a coach and an athlete, and she was able to play in the World Cup in field hockey in 2018, and we traveled to Barcelona, and we got to go to this church that Gaudi's building, the Sagrada Familia it's called. It's going to be the largest church in the world. They've been building it for 135 years, and they're still not done. And there's kind of a story that goes with it, that this old local guy's out there feeding the pigeons one day while they're building it, and a guy comes in carrying his tool bag, and he's, hey, what are you doing today? And he's like, well, I'm building some forms to lay some concrete over here. And the next guy comes in, and he's, what are you doing today? He says, well, I've got to put in some pipes for the plumbing. And the next guy comes in, and he says, well, I'm running wires. And then a fourth guy comes in pushing a wheelbarrow with a big smile on his face, and he says, hey, what are you doing today? He said, I'm building a cathedral. And that guy got the big picture. Those first three guys, they were kind of locked in and focused on just the specifics of right now, and I got a job to do. But that last guy, he got it. He said, I'm kind of working for something much bigger. And that's kind of how we have to approach it is, yeah, we would love to go out there and beat South Alabama last week or be more competitive and things like that. But at the end of the day, trying to build a cathedral, trying to build a program, something that's sustainable and lasts, that people can be proud of around here for a long time and not just in a brief moment. And when you're our age, you're right. You can see that a little bit different, but what we have to do is help our kids understand that so they can keep fighting and go back to work.
That said, it's not without saying that the pipe fitters, the concrete layers, don't have a position and don't have a thing when you do your job, as Bill Belichick said ad nauseum for the 20 years of the Patriots dynasty. Those guys, those little things end up building the big picture.
That's right. And that's what my responsibility as the head of this program is, to see the big picture and help us navigate those things along the way. so that we are ready when that day comes, because that day is coming. And we didn't come here to do anything but grow men and win football games, and that takes time, and that takes work, and that takes effort, and that takes perseverance. And although the night was frustrating, I'm not discouraged at all, because I see where we're going.
You did have some moments. I mean, the first quarter moved the ball pretty well in between the 20s, did have to settle for one field goal, and then the one big play, no surprise, Miles Kidd didn't again. He comes into this weekend leading the country in terms of yards per reception. As you said, you need a couple over 70, that helps the old average.
Right,
but you and I talked about it, I think, last week going into the game, just his story and what he's done and where he's come from a technical standpoint is just, he hasn't moved as quick as he does on that deep route, but he's moving at a pretty good rate.
Yeah, he is. He's a special player, and he has the ability to break a big play at any time in a game, and that's encouraging. If you kind of get in the bind, let's find Miles and see if we can get him the ball in space and see if he can outrun everybody, because he is a little bit of a genetic freak in the weight room, and his numbers and the numbers that Coach Smelser always brings back to us on Miles are just phenomenal. I mean, he's an elite athlete, and he's come a long way with learning the game and improving some technical aspects that he maybe struggled with in the past. So real proud of what he's doing, and still got a lot of football left, so he's going to make a lot more big plays before the year's over. So, but we did, as you mentioned, in spurts there early in the game, move the ball, got a few first downs, a little bit better. But what we did have to do, because the game started to separate to help our defense, is change the style of play a little bit on offense. And I think that did maybe slow down the opportunity to get some drives, but we did want to eat some clock to try to shrink the game a little bit to keep it from going as far as it did. It kind of went there anyway. But that did get us out of our rhythm a little bit offensively. To try to help our defense. And those things happen. You want to play complementary football. If the defense is struggling, the offense needs to do things to help, and vice versa. If the offense is struggling, the defense needs to get the ball back and get some field position and things like that. And the complementary football piece is big and something we're still learning and growing into as a program. But that was a little bit of the thought process as we went through it.
We've talked so much offense, defense, sometimes special teams gets left in the lurch. And I know with the opponent coming up this week, Weber State, they're one that probably the next 4 or 5 days are not going to forget about special teams, given what happened to them Saturday down at Lamar. They're starting their stretch of Southland play.
Yep.
I don't know if we added them as an affiliate member or
That's
not,
right, yeah.
but they've got 3 straight games. You're the middle one. At Lamar last week, they lost that one 17-16. Next week, they'll host McNeese. But here and now, they're coming to Natchitoches, and that's a tremendous program that has built over time. And you talked about the bigger picture. They've been a top 25 team now for several years. They're in one of the power conferences, if you want to say it, at the FCS level. Heck of a challenge coming to Natchitoches Saturday night.
Yeah, it really is. Anytime you play somebody out of the Big Sky, you got your hands full. Them, the Missouri Valley, that's kind of where it's at in FCS football right now. Kind of used to be the CAA, but that one's changed a lot the last few years. But if I know anything about the Big Sky, they're big, they're physical, and they're extremely well coached. I've had the opportunity in the past to coach against a couple of those teams in the postseason. You see a lot of their crossover film, and it's a really good league. And out there, there's not as much Division II football, and the population's so spread out that the FBS football is kind of spread thin too. So those guys get a lot of good players, and they're talented, and they're a really good football team. Going into the last week, they were number 20. I don't know if the polls have come out yet. When they do, it'll be interesting to see what happens after they lost to Lamar. But hard-fought football game. You mentioned the special teams. They've got a returner, number 15, Clarence Butler, I believe is his name, who is dangerous, and we've got to be prepared to cover kicks, stay in our lanes, keep that guy pinned in, keep him away from the ball if we can. No secret there. We're not going to let him have it. But he's a good one. He should have took one back against Lamar the other day and just barely stepped out of bounds. But they're really well coached, do a good job, and special teams will be a big piece of that game.
At this point in building a program, is it a measuring stick when you play a team like this? Since it is an FCS level team? Yeah,
it is. We've played 3 games. 2 of them are FBS teams. So you kind of, you want to compete, you want to play well, but you have to take those with a grain of salt. They are what they are. We've got to be better in those games in the future, no doubt, to get where we want to go. We've played one FCS team in Prairie View that came down to the last play. Prairie View is a good football team. I don't know if anybody paid attention to what they did last week at Michigan State. The score is 40-0, but they actually played them pretty good. I tracked that game pretty close. It's 14-0 the first quarter. Prairie View goes down and misses a field goal. Then they go all the way down inside the 10 and throw an interception that goes all the way back. So it should have been 14-10 at half, with Michigan State, with a slim lead, but a couple big plays flipped that score. So Prairie View's a good football team. They're going to win a lot of games this year. But yes, now the rest of our schedule is FCS opponents. You got a top 25 team coming in here right off the bat. Next week we may have another top 25 team by the time we get there. It depends on kind of how SEMO falls out. But 2 weeks in a row here we'll play, perennial upper echelon FCS teams, and we'll find out where we are in a hurry before we get into conference play.
Kind of in the middle of this non-conference slate right now. I guess technically when you get to halftime Saturday, it will be the halfway point of your non-conference season. But when you do look at this, and you knew coming in, on paper it was going to be a challenge. At this point, assuming all goes well from a health standpoint, how much does that build your team up for Southland Conference play in terms of just the battle scars and the battle wounds and just the reps you get against quality programs?
Well, the key is staying healthy, as you mentioned, and we did have a couple guys get dinged up last Thursday night that we're kind of nursing and working through, and are going to be some game time decisions with a couple of them. But if you steward these games right against really good competition, and the players are mature enough to process what's really happening, they can be of great value, and you can grow from them because you know how hard you have to play and how long you have to play at that high level to have a chance to win. And the margin is very, very slim. And what I know, studying the Southland for a long, long time and really, really close this year, you get in Southland play, it's anybody's game anytime. We saw that last week with a few scores that were really, really interesting. So it definitely helps you. It helps you. It's hard. You got to take your lumps to get there. But we do know conference plays around the corner, but we can't be looking that far ahead yet. We've got two quality football teams we got to get ready for first.
We talked about the Big Sky, and obviously coming here to start the home and home. We will go to Weber State in I think a couple of years. I'm not quite sure when that is down the line. More of a question for Kevin Boston than
26,
for you.
I believe. I think it's 26.
There you go. Have you coached? You mentioned playing them in conference. Have you gone to any of the Big Sky venues? And
I have.
Memories of those?
Yeah, 2 weeks in a row actually. 2016, when I was at the University of Richmond in the second round, we went to North Dakota, not North Dakota State, North Dakota. Year before we went to North Dakota State, and played those guys in the playoffs. And incredible game, incredible atmosphere. We actually beat them on a last-second field goal to send us to the quarterfinals. And then the next week we went to Eastern Washington, out there on the red turf. Coldest day of my life, probably. I don't think the temperature got above 10 degrees. And they have a red turf, but that day was pink because it was a sheet of ice. And we got handed to us pretty good that day in the quarterfinals. They had a receiver named Cooper Kupp, who's pretty good, and he's still doing some pretty good things. But yeah, I've been to a couple of their venues in my FCS experiences, and like I said, it's really, really high quality football. They're really well coached. And a lot of times they are the teams in their area, because there's not a lot of population, there's not a lot of teams, so they all, have big stadiums, big crowds, and it's a pretty impressive conference.
Well, you mentioned coaching the CAA at the time, which really was before it kind of expanded and moved some stuff around. Again, realignment even hits the FCS level. But you were at Delaware, you were at Richmond within that league. What's it like from a week-to-week standpoint within a league like that? The Big Sky is one that's got, every time you look, it's 4 to 5, 5 to 6 ranked teams. It's a meat grinder. And Southland, when it was 13 teams, had kind of the same, similar type of situation. Yeah,
the CAA at that time really was that. For us to get 4 or 5 teams in the playoffs out of one conference wasn't uncommon. Our first year at Richmond, we won the conference championship, shared the conference championship, and didn't get in. I think that was the first time in history that had happened. After that, we were able to go for a couple years, won the conference outright, and then another year we shared it again and went. But yeah, that conference at that time, James Madison was still in, hadn't moved up yet. Old Dominion was in, hadn't moved up yet. Obviously William and Mary and all those schools. I mean, it was something. It was a fist fight every week. And I think the Southland, as you mentioned at one time, was kind of there. But I do feel like we're trending back that way. Last week Southeastern beat Eastern Washington, who's a Big Sky team. That's a huge win for our conference. Nichols went out and played Sacramento State and got beat, but they're a good solid team and they've been out here. So we're competing with those conferences well. But with Stephen F. coming back, with Rio Grande Valley coming in and our conference growing a little bit, I feel like the Southland's going to get back to where it was in those days. And I'm really excited about that. We were talking about as a staff a little bit yesterday as we're kind of learning the conference. Every week is anybody's game. This is a really neat and fun conference. And, I think the upper echelon teams in our conference compete with anybody in the country, just like the Big Sky, just like the Missouri Valley or the CAA once was.
In that sense, rising tide lifts all boats.
That's right.
Coach, as always, we appreciate your time. We'll be back with defensive coordinator Matt Connor. You're watching the Demon Huddle presented by Cross Financial Group here on YouTube.
Super One Foods is proud to be named the official grocery store of the Northwestern State University Demons. No matter where you gather to watch the game, we've got everything you need at Super One Foods, all at super low prices. Plus, you can order online and enjoy same-day pickup with our convenient curbside service. Talk about a game changer. Score big when you shop at Super One Foods, your official NSU Demons grocery store.
Welcome back to the Demon Huddle, presented by Cross Financial Group, joined now by Northwestern State Defensive Coordinator Matt Connor. And Coach, same thing we did with Coach McCorkle. We're just going to rip the Band-Aids right off. And South Alabama Thursday night, just an incredibly imperfect, perfect storm, tough one for everyone involved. How quickly did you get in and get out of that one?
Pretty quick. It obviously it lingers around a little bit. We'll start by saying, it's completely unacceptable. Our kids know it. Our coaches know it. Our standards got to be much higher than that. And there's a lot of outside factors that you could look at as to why that might have happened. But at the end of the day, it's our job to show up ready to play. It's my job to have the guys show up ready to play. We didn't do that. There's no need to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves because South Alabama didn't feel sorry for us, and Weber State's definitely not going to feel sorry for us. So you kind of the beauty of football, college football especially, is it forces you to move on, good, bad, or ugly. You've got to get some corrections made and then, put your head down and move forward. You don't have a choice. Like I said, Weber State's not going to feel sorry for us. So we got a game to get ready for Saturday, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Well, before we get into Weber State, and we will talk about them, a Thursday game in the middle of the season, you get a Saturday off. That's got to be the oddest feeling for a coach, because I know you guys obviously live for game day and you want to get up and you get going. How much does the routine change when you're not getting ready for a 1, 2, 6 o'clock kickoff?
Well, your brain slows down a little bit, that's for sure. We mentioned earlier, first thing I did Saturday morning was get up and cut my grass. That was a little therapeutic after Thursday, just to kind of, get to spend an hour, 2 hours. No one's bothering me, and just me and the lawnmower. You do a lot of thinking and reflecting at that time, but other than that, a lot of sitting on the couch and a lot of watching football. I'll be honest, with ESPN Plus, it allows us to watch. You're watching football, but you're really preparing yourself for the next 2-3 weeks worth of opponents. So.
Did you obviously watch the Weber State game clearly with Lamar, but did you bounce around and watch some other games, or are you one of those that if you're sitting there watching one, you're locked in on one and you're not worried about anything else?
I watched the most Weber State and Lamar. Now, I'd be lying if I say I didn't bounce back and forth between. I know McNeese was on with SFA, great ball game. And then, to be honest, with the Lamar and Weber State game, it really wasn't one you wanted to turn away from very fast. It was a close game all the way the whole time. You felt like anybody could have busted it open any point in time, so it was hard to turn away from that one a little bit.
When you do watch, if it's not one, if you're just in a 1 o'clock window where there was no Southland game on and you're watching it, do you turn your brain off from Matt Connor, the defensive coordinator, and become Matt Connor, just Joe fan, or how is? It seems to be a tough thing maybe for a coach to do.
You might try, but I don't think you ever truly can. You're always watching a game as if you're standing there on the sideline or in the booth getting ready to make a call. Obviously, when you're watching someone else, you don't know all the ins and outs of what they're telling their kids to do or what they're coaching. But it is really it's hard not to pay attention to scenarios and ask yourself, what if I was in that situation? What would I have done? It's a lot less pressure packed if you're sitting on the couch making those decisions as it is you're on the sideline. But no, it is. It's hard. You try to watch it as a fan, but at the end of the day, you're still watching it as a football coach and being in that state of mind. So.
Do the feelings change if you're watching a buddy's team? Do you kind of live and die kind of similar to what you do on the field?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up. When I'm not watching football in preparation to play, you find yourself really following your buddies. And watching certain games that you might not watch, but somebody on that sideline, so you're going to watch it. And then you guys, if you're close enough, you have a conversation about that later in the week, 2-3 days later, good or bad. I had a couple people I had to call out to the South Alabama game and just chew on their ear a little bit. And of course, they were watching and they were coaches and they understand it. And that's kind of a unique family we're in there, which all coaches hopefully get the opportunity to experience that brotherhood in the coaching world.
Well, no brotherhood come Saturday in terms of Weber State. They're in the middle of their Southland run. Joked with Coach McCorkle. I think we've added them as an affiliate member.
Yeah.
They're playing Lamar, us, and McNeese, so they've got the Louisiana-Texas Golden Triangle, if you want to extend
right.
it all the way up to Natchitoches, which we know geographically it doesn't go that far. Don't want to offend anyone down there in Port Arthur and Orange. But, when you look toward Weber State, all joking aside, heck of a game with Lamar. They're going to probably come in with a little chip on their shoulder with a tough loss. That said, offensively, what do you kind of see from them? I know they've got a quarterback that surprisingly I can see eye level with, which is a little bit of a surprise.
Yes, he is. He has been reported to be 5'10"-ish. Throws the ball really well. He's got a really quick release. Does have the ability to run when he needs to. That's not necessarily their first option for him. What they're going to do come in Saturday, they're going to try to get big and run the ball at us. They're the 11th ranked rushing offense in FCS football right now. They do a really, really good job of getting the ground game established. And so we have to do a good job all week of understanding what this game's going to be. It's going to be a heavyweight bout in the trenches. Our defensive line, our linebackers versus their offensive line, their tight ends. And ultimately that's what it's going to come down to, whether we can get them stopped or not. I think the guys are really, so far, we've only had one kind of condensed practice focused on Weber State, but they really rise to the challenge and did a great job last night with that. But yeah, they're really big, they're physical up front. I really have a lot of respect for their offensive line, watching them play as an ex-offensive lineman. They play the game the way it's supposed to be played. They play hard, they play physical, they finish blocks, and they really force you to, they really try to set the tone as far as the physicality, and it's our job to match it and exceed it. So,
You touched on that. You're a former offensive lineman, Blake McCorkle, the head coach is a former offensive lineman. You're on the defensive side of the ball. How does that? You often see that. A lot of times you'll see, our former head coach Brad Laird was a quarterback, then he was a defensive coordinator and a head coach. When you flip sides of the ball, is it an advantage? Do you go back to, how much do you pull on your Rolodex of, man, I hated blocking this, this front, or I hated doing this, and try to incorporate into what you've built? Yeah,
well, I think in very, very small scale, we play with a zero nose quite a bit because I played center and I absolutely hated playing against a zero nose. And so I know how hard that is to control that guy when he's right on top of you and you got to snap the ball, and that makes it really, really tough. But it is. I played offensive line. I actually coached the offensive line for a little while, coached tight ends, and one of my former bosses, Johnny Hill, came to me one off season and said, "Hey, I want you to move over to defense." And I'll be honest, at the moment, I looked at him like he had two heads. I knew nothing about it, and it was probably one of the best things I ever did. He told me that to grow, you've got to coach something that you just don't know about. You'll learn as you go, and so to your point, when I first started, it was a lot of what I knew as an offensive lineman, teaching the defensive line linebackers, but ultimately never came back over. I kind of found a niche and really, really enjoy coaching defense and the mentality that comes behind it, and it's fun.
Well, you've got one heck of a zero nose.
Yeah, we do that.
Johnny Mitchell. Let me ask, as a center, did you ever play against someone the size of Johnny Mitchell?
Yeah, Terrence Cody, I don't know if you remember that name.
Yes, Mount Cody.
Mount Cody, they probably share some very similar measurements, and it was a long night, as Johnny makes a lot of centers' nights very, very long. So,
Mount Cody versus Mount Connor?
Hill Connor? If you can say that, yeah. I was somewhat of a speed bump. I really, thank goodness for good guards and the ability to cut. So.
Even cutting him may have left you with a few dings.
That's right. That's all right. Part of it.
Coach, as always, we appreciate your time. We'll come back for the rest of the Demon Huddle with offensive coordinator Norman Joseph here on YouTube, presented by Cross Financial Group.
Whether it's in the trailer, behind the camera, or on the air, NSU has a place for you. Learn the ins and outs of an ESPN broadcast while getting a full-fledged education in sports media or broadcast journalism. Northwestern State University. New media, journalism, and communication arts. Learn more at nsula.edu/new media.
Welcome back to the Demon Huddle, presented by Cross Financial Group. Final segment of this week's show. As always, offensive coordinator Norman Joseph. And Coach, done it 2 segments now. We're just going to rip the Band-Aid right off. Thursday night, a tough one But a good first quarter from the offense in terms of production. You moved the ball pretty well, settled for a field goal once, and then Miles Kitt didn't striking again, another big play. And I know we've talked with Coach McCorkle, and it's kind of the same thing with you. You enjoy the big plays. They're great. Maybe looking for a little bit more consistency in terms of being able to maybe grind out some possessions.
Absolutely. We definitely need to get our running game going, need to get our control passing game in play. And that's been one of our critical areas and one of a basic topic of conversation in our staff meetings is staying on the field. Let's convert our third down situations, put ourselves in manageable third down situations, and then we'll have a chance to get more first downs. And so that's just executing the calls, putting ourselves in position to make plays, and then execute the play.
For Miles, the start he's had to this year, there have been people that say maybe he can't play wide receiver. He's this or that. I think he's proven them wrong. And what have you seen that's kind of led to this bit of a breakout for him?
I felt like that as our spring training, I'm going to go all the way back to spring. Miles and had really worked hard. A lot of the receivers had. And then JT Fayard, our quarterback, had been with them and throwing. And then all summer long, there was just unbelievable hours and hours that those guys spent in the passing game, working on timing, working on getting to know each other, working to master their craft. And because of that, then Miles has had some excellent ball games for us, some big plays, and we're looking forward to a great season from him as well.
I think one guy we've talked about, Miles, the guy that maybe has become a nice option from a consistency standpoint is Twan Hines. Twan had a big catch there at the end of the Prairie View game where if he's maybe an inch taller, we're celebrating a win. He's a little bit vertically challenged like myself, a little bit taller than I am, but then came in and had two big catches early in that game against South Alabama. And I know the change in philosophy given what happened, but he's come in and shaken off what was maybe a bit of an uncomfortable first season here and really settled in with you guys and the staff.
Twan is a great leader for us. He's a spokesman for our offense. He is a spokesman for our team. And any way we can get the ball to him, then we want to do that. But I will say this about Twan's play. He caught a little crossing route against South Alabama. They were blitzing. JT did a great job getting rid of the football. Twan was in the right spot at the right time and then turned up the boundary and had a lead blocker going for him in front of him as well. And so that was a big play for us. It got us down to the red zone, gave us a chance to put points on the board, and we converted those points.
Sometimes the guys who don't get a lot of the appreciation and the offensive line, and you're looking at 3 straight games where the same 5 guys have started and played most of the downs, most of the reps. How important is that consistency in terms of trying to build the offense week to week?
Well, the one thing that we have done, and I've talked about this and said this for years, as a quarterback coach, as a coordinator, the group that at the end of the year that's the most consistent is the offensive line. And why is that? Because they do the same plays week in and week out, run plays, the pass protections, their techniques, their fundamentals. It's the same week in and week out, where running backs or skill position players, wide receivers, we may motion them, move them, put them in different positions, have a game day or a gameplay route for them that's a little bit different. So sometimes it's not the same as what the offensive line does. So as these linemen continue to improve and play, I believe we're going to see a lot of good stuff from them as the season progresses.
So the one interesting thing about the South Al game, obviously, was being on Thursday night. So you're in the middle of the season. It kind of wrecks maybe a week of production or preparation, but it does give you a Saturday in the middle of the season where you're not coaching football. So what did Coach Norman Joseph do on Saturday when there's no football to coach?
Well, I came up to the office and spent about 3.5, 4 hours looking at the next ball game. And so, and that's where we are right now, looking at Weber State. And so I did that. I did go home and watch some of the ball games as well that were on TV, and that kind of gives. I watch games differently than maybe the fan. I don't cheer and rooting, and holler and get them in front of the TV and like some of the folks I know that do that. We won't call any names, but that's what they do. And but I do watch and I study and I get a fresh idea too along the way. So and that's kind of what I did Saturday, and then I was able to pick up the Weber game against Lamar late Saturday evening and watch that ball game as well.
Well, you took the question I was going to ask is, clearly you don't turn off your coaching side of the brain when you watch football. So you're always looking to pick a little something up here and there.
You're right, absolutely. And there's so many great ideas that people are utilizing with motions and shifts and movements and formations and any kind of wrinkle that we can get to share with our players and our coaching staff that gives us an edge, then I'm for it 100%.
After all, there's nothing new under the sun, right? It's just little tweaks and movements here and there.
It is. It's and you look at guys who have been in the business for a long time, and you look at some new players, new coaches as well. They've got some fresh ideas, and they study the game as well. And I like what people are doing.
You're going to bring in a Weber State team that comes from the Big Sky Conference, which is one of the better conferences in the FCS from a top-to-bottom perspective. Let me ask you, offensively, you hear a lot of times that maybe certain conferences play a certain way. There's more of a, the Big 12 for years was a lot of offense and not a lot of defense. It was spread, it was throw it around, it was air raid. You don't often hear that talked about from a defensive standpoint. Is that a situation where you feel that maybe some conferences play a certain way, or is it basically just team to team?
The Big Sky, and I've coached against that league for a long time. Going all the way back to the 80s and 90s, and they were always well-coached teams. They had physical players and still do. And looking at the Weber, it's exactly the same way. They're very physical up front. They're going to rush you hard. They're going to rush the passer. They're going to play physical with their hands and attack as soon as the ball is snapped. And so they have a number of coverages. So they're going to disguise their coverages and try to play a game that's maybe different from what we normally see, but they are very physical and don't let the high-scoring offenses get in the way of what they're doing defensively, because they are very sound and they play very aggressive football.
And big and strong.
And they are big and strong.
So again, incumbent. We talked about the offensive line. Incumbent on those guys and your tight ends to start to make a way against a team like Weber.
Well, you have to and you brought a great point. If you play with four wides all the time, you're just going to get your brains beat in. And so you got to have a tight end. You got to have a physical game. You got to have some semblance of a run game, and then that opens up some other aspects for you. But to spread the field and think you're going to throw it every down against a Big Sky defensive team, that's not going to happen.
It's going to be a bit of an old school game then. One of those fullback, couple tight ends.
Yes, well, you have to mix. You have to have a good balance, and hopefully we'll be able to do that on Saturday evening.
Our good buddy Jacob Hester will probably like that. You get some fullbacks in there. Those guys they have the fullback trophy, I think, now. So one throws it back to maybe your first time here.
Well, and the fullback is a major player, and with what we do offensively, we start our game plans with our fullback, and then we spread from there. So it's a very active element in what we're doing in our game plans.
As Coach said, build inside out, not outside in offensively.
Exactly.
Well, Coach, as always, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate everyone out there watching. This has been the second edition of the Demon Huddle 2024, presented by Cross Financial Group. We'll see you next week right here on YouTube.